Hello everyone, and welcome to part 4 of our group dive into Braid and looking at the game and talking about it and all that. It's been a little while since the previous video, and somehow in the interim, although I don't believe I've played the game since then, I seem to have lost the save file that I had last time. However, I did happen to have a few save files, and this one has the same amount of puzzle pieces, but I don't believe I got any of the stars. And this file has 2 of the stars already, so it can't be the same file, but I haven't gotten all of the puzzle pieces here yet. So in the last video, we were at World 4 and fixing to go into World 5. World 5, Time and Decision. Like I think I said in the previous videos, there tends to be a focus by people when they talk about Braid on the story in an undue way. I think so. I don't necessarily dismiss the story, and I think it's interesting, but it is kind of just an echoing of the mechanics of the game. So this is sort of talking about making decisions and how those can kind of basically, whether you choose to stay or go or something can affect your life for the rest of your life. And if you had stayed, your life would have been different. I do wonder whether or not it matters that this particular world has 2 books, whereas a lot of the other ones have quite a few more. There doesn't appear to be really a clear indication that like one book would be a decision versus the other. Anyway, so the pit. Once again, we have a reprise of this sort of motif of the pit here. I swear I've talked about this. Maybe I haven't. Anyway, there's a thing here where obviously I want to jump down into the pit, right? But I'm stuck down here without a way to get out, and so I'm set up in a way that it's likely that I will discover the mechanic of this world, which is that there's a parallel universe that goes on to do what you did before. Another kind of clever thing of how this level in particular is set up is that this, unlike the previous pit levels, this ledge over here is kind of set at an angle, so it's like a little bit trickier of a jump. So there's 2 things here to that. There's one that I feel like that makes it more likely that you're gonna jump down and land on the puzzle piece, which is kind of the quickest way to get down there. But then there's also the aspect that it makes it easy for you to do that as kind of like, I don't know, I guess you'd say a higher level technique for getting through the level, that you can kind of just toss your shadow self down there to pick up the other puzzle piece while you continue to go on. Perhaps this is also interesting in that, unlike some of the other pit levels, you don't actually have to kill the monster here. Like, there's really no reason to kill the monster. The monster's just, I guess, there because it's been there in the past. Yeah, so now we move on to what really amounts to be a couple of introductory puzzles to this mechanic. So before you've seen, well, there's parallel worlds, and so this is kind of set up as a, I guess you would say, sleepwalking test to make sure that you're not just sleepwalking through and you actually do kind of understand what's going on. And so you have, excuse any noises, that's me taking a sip of my particular refreshment beverage this evening. So here, if you're just going to sleepwalk through, you'd be like, well, there's this wall over here, and maybe this switch does something there, and oh, it lifts it up. Okay, well, let's try to lift that up and get over there. But clearly it's set up in a way that there's no way that you can make it over here fast enough. And so it kind of requires you to realize, or at least explore, the fact that this switch is kind of this pink color, you know. It has this glow to it. And a shadow as well, which says that it's in both dimensions. So you need to realize that if you let your shadow go over, he'll flip the switch, and that will also open the door in your dimension. Which you might not necessarily have noticed before. You just kind of, that first puzzle, it was fairly easy to go through it without exactly understanding what's going on, other than you realize there's a shadow version of yourself, and the shadow version can pick up the puzzle piece as well, you know. So here you have to like deliberately go out of your way to do something that shows that you understand. And so in that case, it's really just a matter of just going over to the wall, and of course going over and switching, and then just rewinding so that your shadow will go and open the switch for you. So it's, you know, it's a simple puzzle. It's not hard to solve or anything, but it does require a little bit of thinking, I suppose, or foresight. And then here's another, you know, another one of those sleepwalking checks, and it's kind of reminiscent, I feel, of the first world where you have hunt, and there's a guy set up there in a way that you kind of are likely to kill the guy before you realize that you need him. So in this case, it's the same, really the same exact puzzle, because you still have a switch and a door. Well, I ran around for a while. But here you have to realize that because this monster actually does, it doesn't exist in both universes. It's not tied together. It's kind of the counterpoint to that last puzzle, because here your shadow can bounce on the monster, and your monster's still here. So you have to realize that, because you might assume that all objects are connected between the dimensions. Like that might be your natural assumption, because you're looking at this and you're like, well, the switch worked in both dimensions and the puzzle piece worked in both dimensions, so maybe everything works in both dimensions. So this is kind of set up to establish that that's not actually the case, and that that most things are static to one dimension. I've hung around here long enough that it's actually playing the start of this bit, which is like the ending theme. But it's interesting that the song starts earlier, because it's likely that you'll finish this room in less time than it takes for it to go back to here, so that you don't, so that it has a certain motif when you get to the end, I guess, and you hear this song and it feels new, even though you've heard it before. So I guess maybe it feels kind of familiar, but not exactly. Anyway, I'm taking too much time talking for my rewinding to not kind of burn out. So, you know, it's a really simple thing there that you just do this. And actually, you notice that door actually is open a lot longer than it would be otherwise. Well, actually, it's open permanently. I don't know what I'm saying, because there's no way for you to actually be able to get back up there if you've killed this monster already. So you have to do it in 2 dimensions so that you have 2 timelines for the monster. Ah, yes, this puzzle. This is actually my favorite puzzle in the entirety of the game. Yeah. There's, of course, a monster here. I'm not exactly sure what the monster's here for, other than to slow you down, maybe. But of course here, if you played the game are aware, the thing you have to do is kill yourself with the key, and then rewind back so that your doppelganger, Tim, can go run and get the key and then drop it off for you by killing himself. If I have enough time. Of course I don't. Okay, so let's do that again. There's, well, I'll get back to that in a second. But, so there's just this interesting feeling about this puzzle to me because you kind of have to kill yourself in another timeline. Like, one of your okay, so like, if you do a normal like rewind of things, okay, that's not a good spot to stop. But you'll see that Tim is like sad in the other dimension, and this Tim is maybe vaguely optimistic in the main dimension. So that's kind of like the furthest extent of that is like the alternate doppelganger Tim has to die a horrible death in a flaming pit of spikes just so that you can get a key, which is relatively a minor, accomplishment, I guess you could say, in this dimension. One other thing I was going to say earlier was about the fact that the alternate dimension timeline like has a limit, and at a certain point it phases out, and that kind of could seem like an arbitrary and annoying thing to do because, well, I want to set up this thing, but the thing timed out before I had time to do it. But it's actually a smart design decision because it is to discourage players from doing solutions that involve I sit here for 5 minutes to live out this timeline and do something else. So it limits the scope of the solutions that you can have in this world to those that are fairly short-lived and not exactly time-consuming. I still wonder about this little monster guy here. Like, I don't know why exactly he's there. Okay, so then the second puzzle piece in this room. I wanted to take a second to comment on the art style of this level, which is something that I didn't exactly, I guess, consciously process when I first played through here, but I know David Hellman talked about it in one of the Indie Game the Movie special features about it being kind of like a swamp mixed with fancy furniture, and that being like a weird dichotomy to sort of feed into that mechanical bit about having two worlds that are kind of uncomfortably together, There's also an interesting thing here where there's this little box that has a parallax layer inside of it that is clipped off at the edges, so it gives it a sense of depth, but it's not just a straight parallaxing thing, because otherwise by the time you moved over here the edge of it would be sticking out from behind the sort of walls of that room. Anyway, and this puzzle here is fairly simple. It seems kind of impossible at first, but it is actually quite simple to do, because you just sort of have to take doppelganger and distract the rabbit, because otherwise you can't have enough time to get through there. And the puzzle piece, of course, has to be magical, because there's no way for you to get out past that point. Okay, I have a slight concern that the volume level of the game might be too high compared to my voice. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it is. I've been trying to talk fairly loud. I'm going to cut the music a little bit. Well, that's a lot more than I thought it was. Okay, so I'll cut the music a little bit just in case I'm vaguely inaudible. I'd rather not do that. Crossing the Gap, which is, although not my favorite puzzle, is actually a pretty cool puzzle in some ways, and it's one of the few puzzles in the game that I feel like continues to remain difficult even after you've played through the game quite a few times, and I think it's just because there's a lot of series of steps involved. So you think like, okay, well, I'll kill that dude and then I'll do this, and like maybe that's the right thing, or maybe not. I don't know. because you want to have like him make it across that gap, right? But that kind of requires things to be set up. Anyway, I'm not making it look very hard to do this part, but I did play through this fairly recently, not extremely, but fairly. So this bit over here where you have to make this jump that is much further than you can possibly make is probably the puzzle that took me the longest when I was playing through, because I had to realize that monsters would bounce off of your head. It makes sense, you know, when you think about it, because you bounce off the monster's head, so it only makes sense that they should bounce off your head too. But you just never do that, because if you got hit by a monster before, it's like, oh, well, I'm dead, so let's rewind, and I don't want to die. So you almost never are perceptive enough to notice that monsters would bounce off your head. Certainly not perceptive enough to use it. So unlike most of the puzzles in the game, well, okay, the first playthrough I ever did of this game took me about 5 hours, and this puzzle took like one of those 5 hours. So it was a lot of kind of banging my head against the wall, which you can say is bad. I just kind of consider it part of the game, but you know, that's just me. Okay, so onwards and upwards. There's a nice curtain rod here. I think this puzzle kind of on the left here kind of trips a lot of people out too. And I think it's just because this room is so expansive that it feels kind of, you know, there's a general sense in the game to try to divide puzzles up into one screen puzzles, so that you can kind of feel like, okay, this is a puzzle. And even putting this here with the painting is sort of, you can kind of think of it as like a threshold. Like there's a threshold here of a screen that's not related to a puzzle, so that this puzzle feels more separate from that. But even at that, the fact that there's a guy over here in the middle that you have to get the key from, I think kind of can mess people up. I've certainly seen that, where people seem to think, well, maybe I need to get that guy down here, which is, of course, totally impossible. But anyway, you know, and then of course the sleepwalking thing. There's always that. You know, this is not that far into the level, but let's say you played for a while, so you might just kind of sleepwalk through here and be like, do. Okay, I'm over here and I'm flipping the switch, and yeah, look, I can get that puzzle piece. Let's go. Oh, wait a second. And so then at this point, you don't have the key. You realize that you should be out there, and it takes a minute to think, wait a second, I had a key before, and so I could use that to unlock this. I've also seen, which maybe this is an intentional part of the design, but I've seen people do this, where they are thinking about the earlier level where you needed to like set up a path through, and it's, I don't know what they're doing, but you know, they're thinking of like this, and they're like, I'll send the guy in there and he'll flip the switch, and so then they're not so then they're not thinking about that the switch is in a different world, and so of course that doesn't work either. But I think that other puzzles in World 3, where you kind of had to climb up the ladder and you had to go across the switch, and then you had to run back and then flip the switch and then rewind over so that you could drop down. Anyway, the actual solution, of course, is, you know, pretty darn easy, because all you have to do is send your little doppelganger guy to unlock the door that's in both dimensions, but you have to think, you know, you have to think that, oh yeah, that door's pink and that means something, and I've seen that before enough. I don't think you've seen a door, so that's the first one that's a door that's in both. And so you just have to think, oh, okay, yeah, if he unlocks the door, then that means that the door's unlocked. Yeah, then there's this one that I feel like there's two solutions to this, but I can't remember what the harder one is. Like, I feel like there's a hard solution here, or not a harder solution. I should say there's a more involved solution that takes longer, and then there's the solution that is the simplest solution that I know of. The simplest solution I know of is you go like this, and you go down, and then you go over here under the switch, and then you press B, which is the button to hit the switch, and then you rewind back to here, and then you try to flip this switch so that when he gets over there, he'll flip that switch. That's the simplest solution, but I think if I recall correctly, I shouldn't say the simplest. That's because simple makes it sound like it's easy. That's actually, I think, a more difficult solution, because I think you can do. I want to say you can do. Yeah, the other solution is where. Shoot. Well, I'm gonna have to reset the puzzle, so, and then I'll show the other solution that I think is the solution that I solved it the first time, and probably how most people solve it. Yeah, so let's get out of the boss room and do this again. So the other solution that's somewhat more involved, has more steps, is instead of sending the doppelganger down there to hit that switch, we send the doppelganger up here to hit this switch. So we kind of just wait around for a while, and then after we think that we've maybe gave ourselves enough time to go hit that switch, then we flip this switch, and then we rewind back before I was at that point, and go down here and just sort of wait on him to flip that switch. So yeah, this is the other solution that's more involved. I'm not entirely certain that this works. Obviously, I waited around too long, so again, it discourages the waiting around solutions, whereas like more easily what to do here is to be like this and then just run back up. So, you know, by cutting off that time limit, you sort of discourage the player from doing any solutions that would require them to just sit around for a long time. And so instead you do this, which puts me up here. And then you go like this, which I think, yeah, you can raise him up and then you should hit the switch, but maybe that didn't work. It seems odd that the bridge was raised and lowered in the other dimension, even though it's not actually in both dimensions. That's odd. I don't know. So maybe that's not how the other solution goes. Oh well, let's move on. Let's move on into the boss room, where a very sad monster falls to his death immediately. Oh, shoot. I forgot about that slippery slope there. So this, in some ways, is kind of like, I think, World 3's boss monster. I don't remember whether that one had the cannon here. It's interesting that the monsters here I don't know, the monsters are shot onto his head, which obviously would show you, hey, he's in the other universe, or not necessarily in the other universe, but he's dangerous. His head, like if I fell on his head, that would kill me. Oh, that's weird too. He doesn't wake up when the other guy falls on him. That seems a little odd too. You discover all the things that are rough around the edges in Braid. It has flaws. It's not a perfect game. Okay, yeah, so naturally you wake him up that way because that wakes him up in both universes. And then the thing here versus the other one where the guy was immune to rewind, so you could hit him with the same things over and over again. Here it's a little trickier because I need to drop these in the other dimension, not this dimension, because if I rewind, then he gains back his life, you know, obviously. Damn. Come on. Come on, man. He's kind of got some cross-eyed thing going on. I don't know if that's supposed to make him look like more ferocious. He kind of seems a little bit not really that dangerous, you know. He's just a little... He just wants to be left to sleep in peace and have monsters constantly die on top of his head. Can't he get his wish? Whoa, okay. Okay, so then this, unlike some of the previous boss rooms, actually has a secondary puzzle in it. Oh, shoot. No. I brought him back to life. Okay. It has a secondary puzzle in it, which requires that I run over here and flip this switch. Unfortunately, I just rewinded, so that totally undid everything. So you have to flip this switch with Doppelganger and then run over here. No! And then not die, which is a particularly tricky part of it, considering the vast majority of this game, it doesn't matter whether you die or not. Here it kind of does, so I kind of don't want to die. So trying to avoid dying is sometimes not the easiest thing. Occasionally there's the execution puzzles. You're killing me. You're killing me, game. You're killing me. Okay. Yes. So, anyway, we go over here and get him to flip this, and you have to make it over there in time. Okay. We can do this. Actually, a good thing to do, now that I think about it, that might make this a hell of a lot easier, was if I started here and then headed over. That way I would have a point relatively close to the door to rewind to. That would make it much easier on me, wouldn't it, if I actually thought about it for a second. Okay, so let's go back here. Yeah, and so then you just let your little buddy run over there and go flip the switch if he doesn't totally dissipate before then. Because the time limit is pretty close. Hey, there we go. Alright, so I get that. And Fragile Companion, which is a very, very hard puzzle that is very, very easy to execute, unlike that last one that's somewhat easier to understand but very hard to execute. So there's two things here. There's one that you have a green key, which means that it is immune to rewinding, which means that as you can see, if I rewind all the way back to the start of the level, I have the green key still, even though I haven't gotten it from the monster technically yet. And there's two ways to solve this, really. Obviously, the brain dead thing that you might do is just come in here and walk over and hit this door, at which point you're kind of screwed, because the green key, if it's broken in this dimension, it's broken in the other dimension, because it's fixed. You don't like it, don't like the rules, that's how the rules are, that's how they work. If you break it in this dimension, it's broken in the other dimension too. So, even though Tim in the other dimension can carry it around separately from you, and has his own key, if I were to... Does this break that? Nope, that doesn't break it. That's interesting. So it's just something about the rewinding or whatever. That's how it works. You know, I mean, I guess it's easy to criticize, okay, well, that's an arbitrary decision of how that does that, but, you know, anytime you're making a design decision, you have to go between, okay, well, there's a few different choices here. Like, if I rewind, you can do a very simple thing where you say, okay, because I'm holding onto the key and the key's fixed and green and immune to being rewound, that means that he can't have the key and it's always with me and both keys are with me. At that point, it might as well be one key, because there's no real benefit to unlocking something that's in the dimension that you're not in. So it makes more sense for him to be in his own dimension with his own key, because then that allows you to do things where you have an extra key, like this with two doors. So of course the obvious, the easy thing is to do this, where you throw, and then you can throw and open both doors, because you don't need to actually use the key to open a door, because he can use his key to open the door, which doesn't affect yours. In some ways, I guess that makes sense, because he is sad, and earlier he kind of died to get me a key, right? So in some sense, his dimension has to be subservient to mine in some ways, and so maybe that makes sense in the rules of the universe. I don't know. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to show the other solution, which is somewhat simpler, which is that you run up to the door like this, and then you go back around and climb up, and then get the key. And then because the key is fixed, when you go back here and let your doppelganger run, he's going to open the door. And that lets you get in there too. So those are kind of two methods of doing that have a different feel to them, I guess, a different aspect to them, because one, it's like you're rewinding, and then he still has the key too in his dimension before you got it, you know, the last time around, which is kind of an interesting thing. So we're coming out of the swamp and into a little bit more of a nice place, I don't know, with stained glass of the princess. And there is another little dinosaur, only this one seems totally unhelpful. He doesn't even tell me that there's a princess in another castle or not. He's totally lost, and he's just trying to make conversation. So I don't know exactly what that means. You know, I have this question of, does the doppelganger get a doppelganger guy with doppelganger text? No, he doesn't have any text, so there's no way of knowing what he's saying to him. Maybe he's helpful in that dimension. I don't know. But he's lost, and he asked me how I'm doing. I'm doing great. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for World 5, and that's also wrapping it up for Part 4 of our adventure into Braid, playing through Braid. Again, I'm not sure what time this is, like how many times through the game this is for me, but I've definitely played the game a lot and thought about the game a lot. I don't really know if there's a significance to time and decision being in the kitchen. I guess you do have to make some decisions in there. Well, what am I going to eat today? I don't know. Am I going to eat something out of the fridge or out of the cupboard? I don't know. Anyway, next video we will move on to World 6, which is the last of the main worlds, of course, and has some of the stranger puzzles in the game. Alright, thanks for watching and listening, and I hope there's been at least a little bit of insight gleaned from the series thus far. I don't claim to be the person that's excuse me, I have no pop filter on this mic. I don't claim to be the person who has figured it out as far as Braid goes, if there is such a thing as figuring it out, but you know, I've thought about the game a lot, and maybe some of my thoughts are things that you haven't thought about, and of course I'm happy to at this point I've started posting this series for the Patreon backers as kind of a thank you to them. So again, I'd like to thank all the people who have chosen to support me on Patreon, and of course through Patreon you have the ability to contact me, so if you have any thoughts or things to add about Braid or about games in general, then feel free to send me a message there, and you can follow me on Twitter. You probably already are, but I'm just at mvandevender on there, or you can search for my name. Anyway, so thanks for watching, and in the next video we will move on to World 6.